So this week is the parasha of Balak. The week we're coming out of is parasha Chukat. The times that we exist right now in is we're finding unnatural hatred, not logical hatred, not rational hatred against ourselves, against the land of Israel, and it's almost detrimental because there's no logic. So what's our guidance? We have to look in the Torah to find guidance. So fascinating enough, this week's parasha is specifically speaking about the hatred Balak had towards the Jewish people, even though that they had no damage would be coming from him. It's not like a competitor or somebody that's an invader. They would not come to his land. They would not do anything to harm him. And he seeks out, because he knew he couldn't do them harm, he seeks out somebody that should be able to do them harm. And he too, Bilam, understands that he's bound by whatever God wants, but nevertheless he goes with zero success rate. For what purpose? To do harm to the Jewish people, to hate, and the result comes out that he, specifically the person that was perpetuating this hate to degrees that were beyond any scope that anybody could imagine, he was the vehicle for the biggest blessings we have. Okay, but so you could tie it into the parasha by saying the Balak as the hater. You could see chukat, the idea of chukat is something that's beyond rationale. And zot, when we speak about chukat, we don't say there's many chukim, but when the parasha is discussing one specific one, and it calls it, that is the chukah of the entire Torah. So that means it's a category of its own. The chukah of Parah Adumah was unique in that not only was it that it wasn't rational, that it couldn't be understood, because we are accustomed that at times, you can't, there's something that is beyond our scope of understanding. But we're not accustomed to do something. Let me give you an example. If you have two paths, right? One is 0% success rate. One is 20% success rate. Which path do you go? If you have a path that is, will get 40% of the job done, or better chances at 40% of the job done, or you have almost zero success rate on 20% of the job done, which do you go for? So so these things are not only that they're not rational. Imagine you tell me that there's a Jewish person, a tzaddik. He's leading he took responsibility of the entire Jewish nation, and he is constantly doing things that are like almost, not that they're not rational, but they're flying in the face of just regular normal thinking. If there was one individual, and regardless, he's standing on almost zero survival rate and almost 0% success rate. What am I referring to? If you have a country that's also powerful and also well admired and loved, and also and it's also very strong, and it's capable of doing anything at that time. And and you're one individual, one person. Do you go out against them, what they're doing? Absolutely not. Now, how about if the country as a whole is you're going against them in many different areas, okay? But there's one specific area that's involving, a small area. You double down in that specific area. Do you do that? No. That is where you see the idea of a chukah. Chukah is something that flies in the face, and it's so unsettling. This is what the chukah of the Torah is. In Avodat Hashem, in the service of one person to Hashem, that's like the concept of Mesirut Nefesh, but not in the way of Mesirut Nefesh as we know it. All right, let me first qualify this Mesirut Nefesh. Let me identify what are my obligations. My friend, obligations. Let's look in the manual before. There's Mesirut Nefesh over here. There's commitment that it just overflows from a place of the neshama, which is beyond anything. And this is what our previous Rabbi, everything I describe is describing the previous Rabbi in communist Russia, which was, it's the most effective. It's literally going, let's imagine you live in the States and you do something that's hurting and undermining the United States in the most vulnerable spot. Would you do that? Absolutely not. And if you would do that, would you think you'd be successful? Absolutely not. And this is what he did. To them, the key point of their entire government, is that there's no God. So he goes and he spreads and he allows for the Rabbanim, he allows for the Shochatim. He makes sure that there's a Jewish life that could exist. If you choose that life, you will have the resources for it. Okay. Now, there's one area that they're the most against, and that they're gonna fight you vehemently. Do you want to pick them? You want to poke them in the eye about it? And that was the children. Don't deal with the children. And he specifically, and with a category of its own in the level of Mesirut Nefesh they did. Not only he, and that was to teach the children. And at times, he sacrificed he put his life at risk, and that essentially by dealing with these very, very small children. I don't know, maybe kindergarten, maybe first grade, to make these chadarim, to teach them aleph beis. He was putting in jeopardy all the rabbanim, all the shochatim. But these people are adults. They need to have. It's critical that they have these things. A child that's going to miss a few years, but in his eyes, as a nasi, as a person that took responsibility of the survival of the people, this to him was critical. And this was done all in the way of a chukav beyond Mesirut Nefesh. And this was a response of the exact polar opposite of the chukah, of beyond rationale. And not only is it beyond rationale, the hate was so deep and so that to the point where it is beyond rationale, it flies against rationale. Like that we mentioned of Bilam, that he knew for certain he's not going to be successful to do anything Hashem chose not to. And he nevertheless went for it. This is this kind of Mesirut Nefesh, this kind of commitment, this kind of unquestionable you're here and you're doing it not at all costs. It's not relevant. Nothing beyond this specific mitzvah or this specific act right now is filling my mind right now. I'm not looking at this and calculating if I'm going to sacrifice myself to teach these 2.5 kids, these 3 kids, or these 5 kids, one class. Let's say 40 minutes. How many of them are going to be listening? And I maybe go ahead and this may be maybe we're going to, in total, after all of this, maybe we're going to have 5 classes for these kids. And no longer because maybe I'm going to be arrested. And no longer, not only that, the mikvah of the city is going to be closed. The basar is going to be, the shochatim, the rabbanim is all going to be shut down because of these 5 classes that I must make. But that's why we have a Rebbe. That's why we have to have that. That's why it's a Moshe Rabbeinu that instilled, that imparted that this is the kind of Mesirut Nefesh needed, and this is the Mesirut Nefesh that brought about that the chukah of the hatred that's beyond in the form of a chukah. Not only was it like what happened by him, that they gave him the capital punishment, and then they themselves had to commute the capital punishment of death to slave labor, and they themselves asked him to leave, and they themselves facilitated that they had a closed border policy, and they made the exception that he would be leaving. So what do you find? It's similar to that idea of Bilam. And the person was hater, and he wanted to curse us in the most powerful way. What ends up? That he gives the blessings nobody could have fathomed. What brought this about is that kind of Mesirat Nefesh. So it's just so fascinating. I never understood. The way you respond to hatred is not by rationalizing with them, not by saying, I'm not sure you're informed. Speak that language. They have something that's beyond rationale that they're gonna go with it until the very end, and at no cost will it stop them. That's how we do our part. We commit it until the end. We have no rationale that could explain it in or explain it out, and nothing, at no cost, will put us between us and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, us and the Torah and the mitzvot. Shabbat shalom.